This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Welcome to the Living It Out podcast. My name is Kelly Pagel, and with me today is Findlay campus pastor Chris Bainey. Chris, good to have you.
It is always a privilege to be here with you and all of you listening. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, we are so glad that you are here. And Chris, it's not your first time on the show, so I am thrilled to have you back as we unpack our new series, Nah, I'm Good. I think I'm saying the nah right. I heard there's
like so many variations, but the point is, yeah, right? We get it. We get it. We all have those things we don't want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's really what this is all about is what do we not want to do that God is asking us to do? And so to unpack, to look at that, we're in the book of Jonah, which is kind of exciting. It is probably a story that our listeners have heard. I think most people have heard that story of Jonah, but I have to ask, like, as we think about this, as I've thought about this, this idea of not doing something that God has asked us to do. I think it's really easy to point fingers, but have you ever been in that place where God has nudged you to do something and you've been like, nah, I'm good?
That's such a great question. And of course I have. Of course I have, and I would say in my personal life, it's one of those things where you have this decision to make, like, do I want to grow or do I want to be comfortable? And so probably one of the first situations or decisions that I had to make when I was a young man, I knew I had a heart for Jesus and I knew I wanted to go into ministry. I helped launch a church with my dad. Okay. And quite honestly, it would have been easier, maybe not most beneficial, but easier for me to stay in that church with him, pastoring alongside him. He's my dad. He gave me a really long leash, even as a young man when I probably shouldn't have. But then all of a sudden, God planted this idea. My brother was both attending that church and Cedar Creek at the time, and I came to the church and kind of just had a crossroads decision to make. Like, Lord, where are you calling me? Where do you want me to go? My now wife, I'll never forget. She looked at me and she's like, "Why are you fighting this so much?" Ooh. And I said to her, because I don't want to let my dad down. Like, we started this thing together. And I had his blessing. Like, he was like, I think you know what you need to do. And so he wasn't stopping me. And then she looked at me and she goes, well, what are the opportunities that God could possibly do if you make this decision? And together we made that decision. So I entered into volunteering full-time, on staff, part-time, and then ultimately getting to where I'm at today. So sometimes we do have those decisions that are uncertain. God's calling you into them. You're even leaving something good and comfortable to get there. But that's probably one of the best examples of fighting it for too long, quite honestly.
Yeah. And we just had staff meeting and we learned that Chris has been here 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. So that was a 10-year decision, a decision 10 years ago.
So I was 15 when I made that decision. Just kidding. It is humbling because you're like, every year you realize, wow, Lord, I can't believe it's been 10 years. Yeah. And all of the things that God's allowed me to be a part of through saying yes to that opportunity is something I'll never take for granted.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I really posed that question because I think we do hit those crossroads. And
absolutely.
Sometimes I think it's really easy to look at staff people at church and go, oh, they never have to deal with this. And we've all been at that place. And it is just that choice of like, wow, how am I going to trust God as I step into this?
I just want to share one quick side note of that is so powerful. At that time, our founding pastor, Lee Powell, came to me and said, hey, we would love for you to work at the church, but we can only pay you part-time hours to do a full-time job. How do you feel about that? I remember looking at him and saying, can I have 24 hours to think about it? And he's like, of course, go talk to your family, go talk to your, future bride, because we were engaged. And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, and this is kind of cool. He said, hey, if you lean in and trust God through this, if and when we get the finances to bring you on full time, we'll do that. And it was like a handshake, gentleman's agreement. I probably should have had that in writing at the time, but I didn't. But anyway, my point is this, that was a financial situation where I'm starting a new family, and now I've only have a part-time job, and I've got,
Right.
college experience and all these things. And so that's another component where it's like, okay, Lord, I trust you through this. So obviously I'm so glad it worked out.
It worked out. Yes, it did. It did. Well, thank you for those encouraging words.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really helpful. And before we go any further, I want you to do like a quick flyover of that first chapter of Jonah, just to bring any listeners on that maybe aren't as familiar as we think they might be with the story before we dive into some other things. So,
well, absolutely. Let's do a quick flyover here. Hey, the first thing that we learned is that this is not just a children's book story.
Right.
It's very deep. There's layers to it. One thing that Ben pointed out that I absolutely love for you literary people, this is satire. Mm-hmm. It's got a lot of elements of creativity, almost like a play that's happening, and the characters are embellished and different things to point out our humanity in embellished ways. So I thought Ben did a beautiful job. Go back, rewatch how he unpacked that. But here's what's happening. You've got Jonah. He's a prophet. He has the ability to hear from God and share that with other people. That's a pretty awesome gift.
Absolutely.
But it's filled with incredible responsibility. God says to him, I need you to go to a terrible place, a terrible city full of people that are rebelling against me, and please tell them about me. And he's like, nah, I'm good. And so he goes as far as he can in the opposite direction. That's the satire coming into play, like totally opposite direction, super far away. It leads to him being in a storm and ultimately to him being at a crossroads with God and ending up in the belly of this fish, where we can debate that. But like we learned, we're not really going to debate that because that's not the point of the story.
Right.
And so in this moment, Jonah has ran from God's calling on his life, and it's led him to a very difficult situation, something I think we all can relate to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so as you walked through this material, which is, like you said, a fairly familiar story, if nothing else, probably Sunday school, children's church kind of thing,
Veggie
right?
Tale style. If you're
I
going to
cannot
fly
stop
back
singing
to
that song. Okay?
Oh, that's great. Sorry, everybody.
I will not. I promise. Listeners, I won't. I won't. I love you too much. I will not sing on camera. Great. But there is so much to think about with this as we start to look at that in other aspects of Scripture. And so as you've reviewed this familiar story, like what has stood out to you?
Yeah, so here's what's powerful for me. There was a statement that Ben made, and I think we can see this in all of the Old Testament prophecies and stories, whether they are real or storytelling. Here's what we can see is that Jesus really is the perfect version of these individuals.
Yes.
So the perfect Adam, the perfect David, the perfect Jonah. And so when we read through the New Testament, Ben gave a nod to this. Jesus did not run away from God's calling on his life. Right. And so if that is the case, then how did he coach and disciple other people through that? So I'm in my men's group literally this morning, and I'm thinking, I'm going on the Living It Out podcast. I got to prepare for that. And so my men, it's being led by Scott. He's my group's coach, and he gives this nod to Luke chapter 15. For those of you who haven't read Luke chapter 15 in a while, there's a theme throughout it, and it's Jesus's desire to go after the one lost. So the lost sheep, he leaves the 99 to go after the one. The lost coin, they search through the room to find the lost, and then of course the prodigal son, leaves the father, squanders his wealth, and then ultimately comes back home for the father to run towards him. So we see this theme of going after the one. And I just could not help but be overwhelmed with the connection that my group leader made to Jonah and this parable that is being spoken. Because if you think about it, God loved the Ninevites, and they were terrible people.
Yes.
They were rebelling against, like, if you read into that, like Jonah, and Jonah had this philosophy that, like, nah, I'm good. Like, how about the Jews? That, like, we're following you. I'm here. Let me go talk to them. No. I want to send you to the one that is lost. And so that's the parallel that's happening here. You see the very heart of God, and then you see it expressed through Jesus. So he's running after the lost. He wants to go find him. And then it made me realize that Jonah might be a lot like, I might be a lot like at times, as well as Jonah, the older brother in the story of the prodigal son that is looking at the father and say, how dare you? How dare you give them grace and mercy? Because did you see what they did? Did you see what they did to you? And that kind of attitude of righteousness, self-righteousness, or judgment, or lack of mercy. And ultimately, that just leads us to a place of missing the very heart of God, which is his desire to go after the one. So as you read the New Testament, as you reread through Luke chapter 15, see Jonah in the story, and then ask yourself, which brother am I? Am I running back to the arms of the Father, or am I standing in judgment and of people who are running away from God? So it's pretty powerful, and that's I want to thank my group leader for that connection today.
Yeah, that is fantastic. To think about that and really put ourselves in that place of, ooh, which brother are we, and where is our heart, and do we want to step into what the work that God has for us in this world, which is to go after the lost, right? And that's a really challenging question.
We all have those people in our lives. They're our next door neighbors. They're our family members. They're our coworkers. And every day we have a choice to make. Are we going to help them walk towards Jesus, get introduced to Jesus, or are we going to stand in a posture of separating them from that, almost standing back and going, I can't believe that they, and it leads to those unhealthy things like gossiping or where God may be looking at the place that you're in and saying, I need you there. Yeah. I need you there. I need you in that office room. I need you in your family to speak up and create an invitation to find this Heavenly Father that absolutely loves you. So that is that's a hard decision that all of us have to make, and sometimes it's not an easy thing to step into. Yeah. That's what we're learning through the story of Jonah.
Right. Yeah. And it makes me think too, as we think through the different pieces of growth track, that personality, place, and passion, boy, your place might be right with that person to help show them God. And so I think sometimes it's easy for us to overlook that piece of it as well, that we don't see how powerful where we are right now. Yes. And the way that God has gifted us and wired us and the connections he's given to us can really help pull that one that he has for us in closer to introduce him to Jesus.
And it's interesting because sometimes they just need someone to invite them and invest in their life. Like, maybe when you invite them to church finally, offer to have them sit next to you. That's a practical next step. Yeah. Rather than just like, hey, hope you show up. Like, no. My family attends at this time. If that works for you, we'd love for you to sit right next to us. It's that kind of level of opening yourself, or even better, why don't you come over to our house for dinner first before we go to the church thing? I don't know. It might be, or come to my group and experience that with me. It's a safe place, kind of maybe in a home or a restaurant environment, whatever it may be. Because believe it or not, people are intimidated to step into church sometimes because of past hurt, past pain, whatever it may be, or they just don't know what to expect. And so, man, we've got an opportunity here.
Yeah. I think that fear, if they haven't been to church, they feel like they won't get it, or they won't, they'll look odd. That fear is real for someone that doesn't regularly attend. And just having you next to them to show them where to get the coffee and all the little things that we do can really kind of take the edge off that situation. So they're really powerful suggestions there. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm thankful for that. I have a quick story. This just makes it very real. Ken and Bonnie are a couple that attend our church. Their neighbor, Jackie, just tragically lost her husband this past year, and she's been navigating that. Well, Ken and Bonnie noticed that. And Jackie, if you're watching, I'm going to give you a shout out right now because I'm so proud of you. This weekend at our when we're taping this, it's the previous weekend, we have baptisms. And at the end of our service, Jackie took the next step of getting baptized and proclaiming her faith in Jesus through baptism. Guess who was in the front row, holding the clothes, taking pictures, being with them? Her neighbors. Yeah. And so I just think about that and how powerful that is.
Yeah, that is really, really powerful. And just that simple role of being a good neighbor. Led to all of that, and
But we could say, nah, I'm good. I'm going to Wilson this thing and hide out behind the fence. Like never step across the property line or whatever. And open that invitation up.
Absolutely, yeah. And or say, oh, I can't. Now I'm good because I don't.
Right.
Kind of pull a Moses and a Jonah all at
Right,
the same
right.
time, right?
My Wilson reference was to Tool Time. That's an old school
man.
90s.
Yes.
But actually, Wilson was a great neighbor. He actually talked, even though he
did.
didn't come over the fence. So bad reference, but you did better with the with the Moses. Thanks for saving it.
No.
I love it. That's
Wilson,
great.
I haven't thought about Wilson in
Yeah.
a really long time. So, as we think about this, and we've given some practical pieces of how people, of how we've seen people step into this. But for our listeners, what are some practical things now that we can do as we begin to live this out?
When you spend time with God, that's your quiet time. A few messages ago, we talked about kind of pausing with God and picking a place, a time, and a passage. When you're in that quiet time, don't be afraid to ask God the question and then listen to him through his word. But the question is, Lord, where would you have me go? What would you have me do?
Yeah.
Those are a couple quick questions that you can just submit to him and just even say things humbly like, my life is not my own, Lord. Mm-hmm. I am here to serve you. And so where would you have me go? And what would you have me do? And then practically, if you've never been through our growth track experience, that's going to create a conversation around God's unique purpose for your life. Mm-hmm. Lean into that. Yeah. It's going to reveal the place that he has you, your passions, how your personality all work together to lead into your purpose. Those are practical things that we can do just to in our quiet space, listen to God, where he's leading us, what he would have us do, but then also taking a step into discovering our purpose. And for those of you who have your purpose, then put it into action. And start serving and doing and trusting God in those areas. I would ask you, Kelly, in your experience, do you think people are intimidated by some people are better at engaging with people than others? Yeah. So the idea of stepping into a new environment, what advice would you give them? Like maybe they're introverted or whatever. I mean, just I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think one of the easiest ways to do that, to kind of get past that barrier, because I know that I say that it's scary because I was there. Sure. that was part of what I had to navigate through. And I think one of the great things we do is our free market groups. Yeah. That you are stepping into something that you are passionate about. Wow. And you're inviting someone else. Like if they say, oh, you have a volleyball group and someone says, I love volleyball. Okay. Now you have a commonality that is not, it's so easy. It's like it's a zero entry pool that you still have that opportunity to share Jesus, and you're reading some scripture and praying for those people. But it's not that they have to come to an environment that they might legitimately be fearful over. Not that they should be, but they might be. Though.
That's so practical.
So it's if you are in that place where you're like, okay, I've been through growth track. What's my purpose? Well, maybe you want to start a group around something that you just love, and that you're going to be welcoming people in naturally.
Here's a great example. I love Ohio State football. Yeah. I'm going to just open up my home to a group of guys or families to watch the game. And we're going to kind of call that a group because here's what we're going to do. We're going to get to know each other. We're going to scream at the TV and laugh and learn and eat food together. But then I'm going to look at everybody and go like, hey, how can I pray for you this week?
Absolutely.
And it's just like, it's not rocket science. It's not you're leading a sermon on Jonah.
Right.
It's just showing up, and that's a very practical next step.
And just creating that sense of care. Yeah. You brought it up so well with your neighbors, just caring about Bonnie, but that those groups provide that sense of care, which opens the door to a conversation and opens the door to you sharing your struggles and how you navigate that, which could be like, oh, wow. That's how you navigate that they've never been invited into. So I think joining a group, opening, if you're feeling like, wow, what can I do to do this? Leading a group, we help you with that. If you come to group leader training, we'll share more about our structure. You're not alone. You're not an island. We have a whole group that coaches you so that as a new leader, you are supported. But I think that is definitely a great way to step into that and create a really welcoming space for people. So
that's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully that's something that you can consider. And if you're like, I don't know what to do, well, prayer, you mentioned prayer and creating that space. We just started our 21 days of prayer. And so if you haven't yet signed up, send 21 days to 419-419-0707. Text that in and you'll be invited into regular prayer prompts.
Oh my goodness. And that right alone, I mean, that's just praying every day over even something that's given to you. That just makes it more comfortable. And then over time, you realize I'm praying all throughout the day, asking God to invest into my life or lead me or guide me. Hey, I'm stepping into this meeting. Lord, would you give me the words to say? Like just little things like that. But it starts with that daily habit of saying, hey, for the next 21 days, I'm going to pray with my church.
Yep.
And so these are some very practical things that we can do to avoid the temptation of being what I love Ben is referring to as the Jonah generation that is going to look at situations and opportunities and just say, nah, I'm good. That's for somebody else.
That's right. Exactly.
It may be for you. Trust God through that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I don't have anything else, Chris. That's a great way to wrap up. I think we did it. Yeah. So thank you for being here. Thanks for all that wisdom. And listeners, thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
We hope and pray that this time has helped you remember that you matter, and that God has a purpose and a plan for you, and that you will step into that as we go forward. And have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much for being with us.